The Hulk is overrated, plain and simple. He's more punching bag than powerhouse in the Marvel Universe. Despite being touted as the strongest one there is, he's been repeatedly humiliated, proving that raw strength is no match for cosmic forces, superior tech, or even basic strategy. From being swatted away by the Silver Surfer to being outsmarted by Iron Man, skewered by the Red Hulk, and even devoured and then ripped apart by Wolverine. The Hulk's track record is littered with embarrassing losses. Let's face it, these examples, and many more to come, demonstrate that the Hulk might not be so mighty after all. Following the cataclysmic Chaos War, instigated by the Chaos deity Amatsu Mikaboshi, the Hulk and his Warbound found themselves disillusioned and enraged by the apparent apathy of the Olympian gods. Believing these deities had shirked their duty to protect Earth, Hulk, fueled by righteous fury, led an assault on Mount Olympus. He intended to confront Zeus and demand accountability for their inaction. However, the king of the gods was not one to tolerate such insolence. A brutal confrontation ensued, with Zeus swiftly and decisively overpowering the Hulk, shattering his ribs and leaving him battered and bruised. To add insult to injury, Zeus commanded Hephaestus to bind the defeated Hulk to a stone, where he was then subjected to a horrific torment reminiscent of Prometheus by a flock of ravenous monstrous vultures. This humiliating defeat served as a stark reminder that even the seemingly limitless strength of the Hulk could be dwarfed by the divine power wielded by the gods of Olympus. At number 9, we dive into a humiliating defeat for the Hulk at the hands of Namor, the Submariner, in his natural habitat, the ocean depths. The encounter began when Bruce Banner, in need of medical treatment, was brought to Atlantis by Lady Dorma. However, a confrontation erupted between Namor and Dorma regarding her perceived betrayal for aiding a surface dweller, ultimately triggering Banner's transformation into the Hulk. Not one to tolerate destruction in his underwater kingdom, Namor unleashed the full fury of the ocean upon the Green Giant. The Submariner manipulated powerful currents and tidal waves, swirling the Hulk around like a ragdoll until he lost consciousness. This soggy smackdown proved a humbling experience, as the unconscious Hulk was unceremoniously deposited on the shore after reverting to Banner. This defeat highlighted that even the Hulk's raw power could be neutralized by a force of nature, especially when expertly controlled by an opponent as formidable as Namor in his aquatic domain. Landing at number 8 is a chilling glimpse into a dystopian future dominated by the mad titan Thanos, where the Hulk suffers a truly degrading defeat. In this alternate reality, Thanos has achieved his horrifying ambition of eradicating half of all life, leaving the universe a desolate wasteland. The Hulk, once a symbol of unstoppable rage and power, is reduced to a pathetic shell of his former self. Broken and subjugated by Thanos, he is kept like a beast in a pit, a horrifying existence where he is forced to consume the remains of his fallen comrades, the Avengers included. This grim portrayal of the Hulk as Thanos' pet showcases the Mad Titan's absolute power and utter ruthlessness when his goals have been achieved. This ultimate defeat underscores the horrifying truth that even the mightiest of heroes can be broken and utterly demoralized when facing an insurmountable and merciless foe like Thanos. At number 7, we witness a triumph of technology over brute force as Iron Man manages to subdue the Hulk in a grueling confrontation. When Tony Stark's attempt to assist Bruce Banner with his volatile transformations backfires, the enraged Hulk breaks free, forcing Iron Man to deploy his specialized Hulkbuster armor. However, even this formidable suit proves insufficient to contain the Hulk's unbridled fury. Pushed to his absolute limit, Iron Man is forced to disable the suit's safety protocols and channel all of its power into a single, devastating blow, finally knocking the Hulk unconscious. This victory, while hard-won, served as a potent demonstration that even the Hulk's seemingly limitless strength could be overcome by a combination of human ingenuity, cutting-edge technology, and a little bit of desperate risk-taking, though it certainly dealt a significant blow to the Hulk's pride. Swinging in at number 6 is a shocker, the Hulk's defeat at the hands of the Amazing Spider-Man, albeit a Spider-Man significantly enhanced by the cosmic might of the Enigma Force. This powerful energy transformed Spider-Man into Captain Universe, granting him abilities that rivaled, and in this instance, surpassed those of the Hulk. During an encounter with the Hulk in his gray Joe Fix-It persona, the newly empowered Captain Universe delivered a single, cosmically charged punch that sent the Hulk hurtling into orbit. To add insult to injury, the cosmically powered Spider-Man retrieved the Hulk only to deliver a nonchalant, no hard feelings before departing. This humiliating defeat underscores that the Hulk, despite his immense strength, is vulnerable to cosmic level powers, and that even seemingly less powerful heroes can become formidable threats when augmented by such forces. Marking the halfway point at number 5 is a swift and decisive defeat for the Hulk at the hands of the Silver Surfer, a powerful cosmic entity. In a desperate attempt to evade the persistent military, the Hulk mistakes the Silver Surfer's iconic board for an escape vessel. When the Surfer refuses to allow the Hulk to board, a predictable tantrum ensues, culminating in a physical attack. However, the Surfer, wielding the immense power cosmic, effortlessly subdues the Hulk with a single powerful blow from his board. The Surfer then departs, leaving the Hulk bewildered and alone, highlighting the fact that even the strongest sometimes find themselves outmatched. This encounter serves as a potent early demonstration of the Hulk's susceptibility to cosmic level powers, showcasing that brute strength alone is often insufficient in the vast and power-laden Marvel universe. Coming in at number 4 is a truly shocking and brutal defeat for the Hulk at the hands of his Crimson counterpart, the Red Hulk. During a contest orchestrated by the manipulative Grandmaster, an elder of the universe known for his elaborate games, the Red Hulk seized the powerful Trident of Atlantis. This mystical artifact, typically wielded by Namor to command the oceans, became a lethal weapon in the Red Hulk's grasp. In a swift and violent maneuver, Red Hulk used the Trident to impale the Hulk, a gruesome and unexpected end for the Green Goliath. This devastating defeat was not only a low point in the Hulk's career, but also served as a stark reminder of his vulnerability to sufficiently powerful weapons. Furthermore, it demonstrated that even individuals possessing similar power sets could pose a grave and, in this case, fatal threat. At number 2, we have another instance of the Hulk suffering a devastating defeat at the hands of a cosmically empowered entity, this time a being known as Captain Universe, but not the Spider-Man version. In this scenario, the immense power of the Enigma Force, previously mentioned in its enhancement of Spider-Man, was channeled into the Tri-Sentinel, a foe typically associated with the Web Slinger. Already a dangerous adversary, the Tri-Sentinel became virtually invincible when imbued with this cosmic energy. The Hulk, in a confrontation with this supercharged being, was met with a force far exceeding his own. Captain Universe, in this form as the Tri-Sentinel, unleashed a devastating punch of such immense power that it sent the Hulk flying helplessly into the vast expanse of space. This humbling defeat served as yet another reminder that despite his formidable strength, the Hulk remains vulnerable to the immense power wielded by cosmic entities and the forces they control within the Marvel Universe. Claiming the top spot as the Hulk's most utterly humiliating defeat is a truly gruesome and shocking end at the hands, or rather claws, of Old Man Logan. In the bleak dystopian future depicted in the Old Man Logan storyline, where villains reign supreme, the Hulk has degenerated into a monstrous cannibalistic parody of his former self. Driven by a depraved hunger, he tragically consumes Wolverine whole. However, Wolverine, possessing an unparalleled healing factor and an adamantium skeleton, enacts a horrific escape, tearing his way out of the Hulk's stomach from the inside, killing him in the process. This brutal demise is not only physically devastating, but also represents the ultimate degradation of the Hulk, a once noble, albeit rage-fueled, hero reduced to a grotesque and ultimately pathetic creature. This defeat serves as a chilling testament to the horrors of this alternate future and remains a truly unforgettable and deeply disturbing moment in Marvel history, forever solidifying its place as the Hulk's most humiliating end.
Number 10, tormented and defeated on repeat. When Joker received 99.9% of Mr. Mxyzptlk's power, he used this power to wreak all kinds of havoc. One of the things he used these new epic reality warping powers for was to torment Batman forever on repeat. Daily, Emperor Joker would severely torment and kill Batman, although in the end, Batman was the key to Joker's defeat, being Joker's one true weakness, since his identity was so closely tied to Batman's. However, Batman was left so traumatized from this whole experience that he became a broken man, a shadow of his former self, unable to operate as a hero. Superman actually had to steal his memories of the experience away in order to return Batman to himself once more so he could resume being a hero and just not being like a complete mess all the time. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us by clicking that like button. Number 9, A League of One. Superheroes don't always lose to supervillains in the comics. In the case of the JLA story A League of One, this time around the League is actually defeated by one of their own, Wonder Woman. However, Wonder Woman doesn't do this to actually cause them harm or, kill them, but simply to get them just out of the way. This is because the League is facing a dragon and there is actually a prophecy that it will cost the group of heroes their lives. Wonder Woman not only manages to defeat the League, but also manages to sidestep her own doomed fate upon facing that dragon. Number 8. Loss of his parents. Obviously, one of the worst defeats to happen to Batman happened to him when he was simply known as young Bruce Wayne. This would be the loss of his parents. Without them dying, he wouldn't be the man he is today, for better or for worse. The death of his parents tormented young Bruce so much that it, along with another freak encounter with a bat, inspired him to become the masked vigilante known as Batman. So in a way, it's this trauma that has led to so many of the other awful experiences that Batman has suffered through, countless physical injuries as well as mental and emotional turmoil, and both victories but also other defeats as well. Number 7. Tower of Babel. In the Tower of Babel event, Ra's al Ghul manages to use Batman's own intel and files on the Justice League to defeat them. Ra's gains access to Batman's systems and is able to retrieve these detailed files and plans via his daughter Talia. He uses this information to take on and defeat all members of the Justice League, even managing to seemingly distract Batman by robbing the graves of his parents. Number 6. Death of the Justice League. The Death of the Justice League kicked off in issue number 75 of the 2018 Justice League series. What happened to the Justice League here? Well, they faced off against Pariah, who himself is from one of the first worlds to be targeted during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Pariah was cursed with basically watching all these worlds die again and again, unable to stop it, despite being one of the first people to warn everyone that Crisis on Infinite Earths was coming. Now, with the multiverse reset following the events of Death Metal, Pariah claimed that he saw the signs of Crisis on Infinite Earths happening again. Desperate to prevent this, his plan was to wipe the slate clean when it comes to the heroes, so that the possibly new Anti-Monitor, who will come into existence, will have no reason to continue with the crisis. That was his thinking anyways. Seems like some flawed logic to me, but this man has also seen some terrible things in his time, so I understand his desperation to do whatever he thinks will work when it comes to avoiding another crisis. Along with most of the rest of the League, Batman was believed to have perished in the fight against Pariah. Of course, we later learned this wasn't exactly what had really happened. Not quite what we thought, as usually when people perish in comics. We're like, they're gone? No, they're back. Number 5. Failed Barbara Gordon. One of the hardest failings for Batman was when Barbara Gordon and her father, Commissioner Gordon, were successfully targeted by the Joker. Caught unaware, Babs found herself shot through the spine and paralyzed as a result of this attack. She was attacked and tormented by the Joker, who took pictures of her in pain and in states of undress for the purpose of making her father go insane. This all happened in Killing Joke, and though not all of the events of that story were made canon, Babs' pain and becoming paralyzed were. Batman has always felt awful for what happened to Barbara and has never blamed her, and if anything, he feels more guilty for the fact that he wasn't there and wasn't able to protect her more. Number 4. Defeated by the Joker. Jason Todd was lost to Batman years ago when he was defeated by the Joker. Really, both Jason Todd and Batman were defeated by him, as the loss of Jason would haunt Batman for years afterwards. Jason Todd was one of those characters you expected to stay dead too. For years, his death was considered one of the few permanent and unyielding ones in comics, kind of like Uncle Ben, who has always pretty much stayed dead. We never expected to see him return, and yet more than 20 years later, he did just that. The return of Jason would be another rough moment in Batman's life, as when Jason returned, he was drastically and forever changed. Losing Jason had already been one of the hardest moments of Batman's life after all. His coming back, unfortunately, didn't make the loss Batman had suffered years earlier with his defeat to the Joker any less painful, unfortunately. Number 3. Final Crisis, which actually apparently wasn't so final, as Dark Crisis did end up following after its events. But regardless of whether or not it was actually final, Final Crisis was definitely a bad time for Earth. In this story, Darkseid actually succeeds in obtaining and releasing the anti-life equation on Earth. He puts it on the internet where it can be easily seen and then spread. Those who see it basically lose their will to live, becoming enslaved to Darkseid and his will instead of having their own will. While in the end, the heroes do manage to break free from the influence of Darkseid and the anti-life equation, with Batman himself defeating Darkseid in the end with a Radion bullet, Darkseid still works to enslave all of Earth and many of its heroes, for a time being seen as the victor. And even when Batman does succeed in defeating Darkseid, he himself is believed killed as a result. However, in reality, he was kind of just like thrown way back through time and went to essentially have time-traveling adventures until he finally made his way back to the main continuity universe. But hey, we didn't know that at the time. We had to wait to find that out. Number 2, death of Damian Wayne. Batman has lost a lot of Robins over the years and a lot of adopted sons, but Damian Wayne was his natural heir. Well, natural-ish. As natural as it gets till we get a Helena Wayne in the main continuity, if that ever happens again. A girl can dream, at least. Damian was the son of Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul. He was raised by Talia in the League of Assassins, without Batman even knowing of his existence, until years later when Talia dropped him off on Bruce's doorstep, declaring Damian his son. Initially, the two did not get along very well. Damian was stubborn in his ways and insisted on killing, as he'd been trained his whole life to do, because League of Assassins, but eventually he came around and began to see the value in his father's approach to fighting crime, respecting it and even admiring it. Just as their relationship began to evolve into something more resembling a true father-son connection, built on respect and trust and all that good stuff, Damian was killed by the Heretic, a death that Batman can't even bring himself to avenge when he realizes that the Heretic is Damian's clone. Following Damian's death, we also got Volume 2 of Batman's issue number 18, an issue that focuses on the mourning of Damian's passing and is completely wordless throughout its sorrow-filled pages. Of course, Damian Wayne would also return, but you know, at the time it was brutal. Number 1, death of Alfred. What could possibly be a greater defeat than the loss of Batman's parents, Batman's son? How about the loss of his confidant, his butler, and more importantly, his lifelong father figure, Alfred? I don't think it gets much more brutal than this. While the death of Batman's parents is tragic, Alfred was there to help pick up the pieces and in essence help to raise the boy before his parents passed and of course thereafter. He was probably one of the closest people to Batman and was more apparent to Bruce in the end than his parents were able to be due to them being lost to him when he was so young. Alfred was shockingly killed by Bane after he kidnapped him when Damian Wayne didn't take Bane's threat seriously and set out to save Alfred. Bad idea, Damian. It was because of his pursuit of Bane that Alfred was killed by the villain, and this was all part of Bane's plan to break Batman again, but this time focusing more on breaking him mentally and psychologically than, physically. Number 10, Civil War II. Captain Marvel and Iron Man used to be super close, but then Civil War II happened and BAM! We are well past the events of Civil War II now, especially regarding relationships being mended, but boy, did this initially muck up the friendship between Carol Danvers and Tony Stark. Although more recently, Tony actually just tallied votes from Legacy Avengers members and actually elected Carol the new leader of the team. Healing! After the success of Civil War I, Marvel thought a second Civil War was in order, but this time the motives behind it weren't quite as solid as the first time around. Carol Danvers believed the Inhuman Ulysses' visions of potential futures should be acted on to protect humanity. In other words, Civil War II was basically Minority Report. Being down this road before, Iron Man tried to talk Carol out of this madness, but after Rhodey died when a prediction of Ulysses actually came true, there was no stopping her. Ultimately, the event led to a one-on-one fight between Carol and Tony, with Tony being seemingly permanently defeated. Although this is Iron Man, of course, so of course he would recover. We can't have Marvel without Iron Man, so he has to come back. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us you love us by clicking that like. Number 9. Hulk blames Tony Stark for his creation. This fight comes to us from Original Sin. Original Sin was an event where dark truths from many different characters' pasts were unearthed. In Bruce Banner's case, this involved him learning that Tony Stark was the one who basically caused the accident that turned him into the Hulk. Once he knows, Hulk becomes driven to end Iron Man, and while Tony tries to escape and defeat the Hulk, he ultimately fails. In the end, Hulk comes out on top, but despite Tony being badly beaten along the way, the two old friends were able to resolve their past conflict, with Hulk's Bruce Banner realizing that what Tony did years ago, nerfing his gamma explosive, wasn't really that bad in reality. I mean, if not for Stark doing that, Banner probably wouldn't have even survived the explosion and wouldn't even have been alive today. That being said, if he had perished, he also wouldn't be the Hulk, which he kinda is like, I don't even know, should I even be here? But while he regrets his transformation, Tony berates him, saying that the world does need the Hulk and that his being around is not inherently bad. That Banner and Hulk are needed and wanted in the world. Honestly, while the fights are epic, the resolution is also quite epically touching here, I gotta say. I love the end of that when they just sit down and they're just having their little talk. Talk it out, guys. Sometimes you gotta Hulk smash it out, sometimes you gotta Hulk talk it out. Number 8. Carnage cracks Iron Man. I feel like one of the worst things you can do in a fight with Carnage is bring a symbiote into the fight with you. Bad idea. And yet this is exactly what Tony Stark decided to do in Extreme Carnage Alpha and Omega. He decided to get involved in all things symbiote when Null attacked Earth, infecting one of the symbiote dragons with Extremis to create the Extremiote. But bringing this new organic suit into a fight with Carnage was kind of a bad idea, as Carnage took over the Extremiote, leaving Tony completely vulnerable, as he was of course naked underneath. While he was beaten here by Carnage and ended up in the hospital to recover, fortunately Agent Anti-Venom was around to ultimately save him from Carnage's wrath and help avoid any worse damage to Stark. So thank goodness, but he still got his butt whooped. Number 7. Pepper reins in an evil Tony Stark. The amount of times heroes have actually had to take on Iron Man is staggering. I mean, you'd think, considering how massive of a hero he is, especially now with his story becoming a worldwide sensation thanks to the MCU, that Iron Man would typically have some of his worst battles against villains, not heroes. But yeah, Iron Man has done some bad stuff in the past, which has meant that even his closest friends and allies such as Pepper Potts have had to turn against him. In this instance, Tony had his alignment reversed during the events of Axis, but rather than allow them to be flipped back, he instead remained a villain even after the event had ended. Tony saw himself as a superior version with no morals to hold him back, becoming known as Superior Iron Man. As such, Pepper was ultimately forced to take him down with the help of an earlier version of Tony who he dubbed Inferior Iron Man. Number 6. Nothing can tame Bruce Banner. Starting off Hulk issue number 1 with a bang, Donny Cates had Hulk face off against Iron Man in his Hulkbuster armor. Not just one Hulkbuster though, a whole entourage of them. Hulk here being piloted like a spaceship by Bruce Banner, who is in control of Hulk on the inside, even manages to learn that Tony isn't actually inside these suits, but is hiding elsewhere, remote piloting them. He literally learns this by ripping them apart, and then Tony is like, "How did you know I wasn't in that suit?" And he's like, "I didn't know that. I'm crazy." Hulk then finds the real armored Tony and starts wailing on him. Even when Stark attempts to appeal to Bruce's better nature, trying to talk him down, Hulk does not relent. Number 5. Thor's apocalyptic clone. Thor and Iron Man don't always get along, despite them both being colleagues and friends who are both Avengers. Following the first superhero civil war in the comics, the two ended up having some pretty big beef, thanks to Tony making some questionable decisions during that era. Chiefly, it was revealed that Stark had acquired a genetic sample of his friend Thor. I'm just imagining Tony like at the Avengers mansion or something, raiding through Thor's like hairbrush late one night for those sweet genetic samples. He's like, "Ha ha ha, I have his hair, I can use this at some point." And he decided to keep these genetic samples for a rainy day, in case he ever needed to make, let's say, a Thor clone. After Thor died, that's what he did, creating Ragnarok, Thor's bald and villainous clone who would end up being recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. Needless to say, Thor was not too happy to hear of this upon his return to the realm of the living, and ended up revealing just how displeased he was in a one-on-one fight against Iron Man, which went as well for Tony as you would probably imagine. After all, Thor is a god. Thor wouldn't kill Tony, but he definitely made sure to make it known that if he wanted to end Iron Man's life, he could with ease. Number 4. Black Panther gets creative. Who is smarter, Tony Stark or T'Challa? Most people would pick Tony for this kind of versus, but Christopher Priest's Black Panther would say otherwise. In issue number 45 of the 1998 Black Panther series, Iron Man in a stealth suit faces off against Black Panther. This stealth suit was specifically designed for such a task, with Tony attempting to anticipate both Black Panther's offensive and defensive abilities. But what he can't seem to prepare for is just how brilliant T'Challa is, with him demonstrating how resourceful, creative, and brilliant he is in his brutal takedown of Iron Man's stealth armor. Sneaking up on T'Challa, it turns out, is kinda always a bad idea. Number 3. Thanos wins. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, technically one of the greatest defeats of all happened to Iron Man 2. This was when Thanos initially won against all the heroes of Earth and succeeded in collecting all the Infinity Stones and using them to snap half of the population out of existence. It was a wild time for us, and I'm sure the heroes alike. Iron Man learned that the heroes had lost back when he was left stranded on another world, the home world of the Mad Titan Thanos, known as Titan. Not sure if he'd even make his way home ever again. He also ended up being one of the few people left alive after the battle had been fought and Thanos snapped. Iron Man was there to see his protege Spider-Man turn to dust before his eyes as one of the casualties of the events of Infinity War. Number 2. Black Widow does the unimaginable. Black Widow majorly betrayed Iron Man in the Ultimate Universe. While she didn't defeat him at the end of the day, her turning on him came with a pretty great cost, so I'd still say it was a defeat in a way. And while Iron Man did ultimately win in the end, he himself was still standing. I would argue that initially Iron Man was seemingly defeated in ways by Black Widow, who caught him off guard. Also, sure, it's not main continuity, but it's honestly so bad it needs to be acknowledged and mentioned here. In the Ultimate Universe, Black Widow was only posing as a hero, but was really in secret a villain the whole time, simply pretending to defect to get in with the heroes and then betray them and the United States. She was engaged to be married to Tony Stark and ended up breaking off the engagement when she revealed her true colors. She attempted to steal Tony's fortune and tragically killed his loyal butler and friend Jarvis as well. Number 1. Thanos' henchwoman wins. Not only has Thanos won against Tony Stark before, but in the comics, Thanos didn't even fight directly against Tony during the Infinity Gauntlet saga. He apparently had less respect for Iron Man than he expressed in the MCU. Instead of fighting Iron Man one-on-one, Thanos decided to deploy Taraxia. Taraxia was basically created by Thanos in his image to act as his partner after Death rejected him. As such, Taraxia basically looks like Thanos, but with a feminine shape and a head full of long blue hair. She was tasked with taking on the heroes at Thanos' behest, and did so with great pleasure. When facing Iron Man in Infinity Gauntlet issue number 4, she brutally defeats him by removing his head from his body.
Number 10. Wolverine loses his skeleton. During 1993's Fatal Attractions crossover event, the X-Men once again had to go up against their old rival, Magneto. The X-Men got the upper hand in this conflict by using the combined psychic powers of Jean Grey and Professor X to cause Magneto to relive all of his worst memories in order to distract him, which is already pretty brutal when you consider that Magneto was a prisoner in German death camps in World War II. Wolverine attacks Magneto and gets a good scratch in, which leads the Master of Magnetism to do one of the most disturbing things imaginable to the fuzzy Canadian. He pulls out Wolverine's metal skeleton, leaving him a twisted heap of adamantium as the X-Men can only look on in horror. It's a brutal moment, but it doesn't really fit the never saw it coming side of this. I mean, he's a guy with metal bones fighting a guy named Magneto. If anything, I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often. Number 9. Sentry vs. Ares. When Norman Osborn set his sights on conquering Asgard, he tricked the god of war Ares into helping him do it. As the battle raged on, Ares discovered that he had been tricked and turned on Osborn, vowing to destroy him. Unfortunately, Norman had the Sentry with him. Worst still, this version of Sentry had given in to the darker urges of his void self. Ares did his best against Sentry, but the fight ended in a truly brutal fashion, with Sentry ripping Ares in half in a shower of gore and entrails. It's a lot, but although you could make the case for it being one of the most graphic Marvel moments, I don't think it checks enough emotional boxes for me to consider it the most brutal by any means. Number 8. Punisher's Steamroller. Frank Castle isn't known for working well with others, but if there's anyone you'd think he'd get along with, it would be Wolverine. They teamed up in Punisher Volume 6, number 17, and it quickly went off the rails, with them being swarmed by a gang of little people who wanted to cut off their legs in order to make them short. In order to get Wolverine into a fit of berserker rage, Frank makes fun of Logan's height, causing Wolverine to go after him. Wolverine calmed down, but Punisher decided that he was slowing him down and blasted Wolvie's legs apart. After taking care of the gang of little people, Frank decides that the best way to keep Wolverine from coming after him is to run him over with a steamroller. Wolverine will obviously heal, so it doesn't have long-term consequences, but it's still a pretty rough move on Frank's part. Number 7. Alpha Flight vs. Michael Pointer. During the events of M-Day, a mutant named Michael Pointer was taken over by an evil being called the Collective, who used him to destroy an Alaskan town. S.H.I.E.L.D. sent in a couple fighter jets to keep an eye on the situation, but they were promptly destroyed and the Collective made his way into Canada. Now, keep in mind, this is a list of brutal moments for me. So imagine my excitement reading an Avengers issue where my favorite superhero team, Alpha Flight, shows up to try and reason with the villain. Now imagine my horror when the SHIELD agent's command center suddenly loses contact and the next thing I saw was the entire team's twisted and mangled corpses. These guys had their own 130 issue series for years, so it's not like they're just nobodies, and now they were suddenly just dead. Now I get that not many people like the team as much as I do, so for perspective, imagine if your favorite team was the Fantastic Four, and they were horribly mutilated off-panel. Oh, poor Guardian. That's like the 5th time he's died. I think that what makes this such a brutal moment for me, beyond my personal attachment to the characters, is that it is so quick and off-panel, leaving us to imagine what horrible things were done to leave such a terrified-looking gory mess of Canada's super team. Number 6. Rick Jones's fate worse than death. Immortal Hulk is a cosmic horror series with plenty of brutal moments, with characters constantly getting eviscerated and transformed into creatures that are pure nightmare fuel. You could make the case for Banner, Absorbing Man, or any of the Hulks earning this spot, but no one quite got as brutal a fate as Hulk's old friend Rick Jones. When the Shadow Base wanted to go after the Hulk, they combined the deceased Rick's body with that of the Abomination, causing Rick to transform into a bizarre and terrifying creature with 2 of Rick's faces and hands growing out of his head, which would vomit acid at the Hulk while Rick begged for help. He was eventually removed from this abomination, but a few issues later, he was once again fused with a gamma mutate, this time Del Fry, leaving Rick a twisted co-joined mess, with Rick's screaming head being the arm of a glowing green skeleton creature. Number 5. Carnage USA. One of Spider-Man's most brutal and sadistic villains is Carnage. He is a serial murderer named Cletus Cassidy, who bonded with a symbiote and became an even more dangerous and twisted villain. He has had a lot of brutal moments over the years, such as his actions in Maximum Carnage and Deadpool vs. Carnage, but my preference is for the miniseries Carnage USA. In this story, Carnage goes to a small town and sneaks into a meatpacking plant in order to eat an entire herd of cattle so that he can get strong enough to take over the town. He sends the symbiote in through the water pipes and takes over men, women, and children, forcing them to attack each other and holding a few of them hostage for and amusement. There are some brutal Cletus moments, such as sending a woman out to collect her husband's head in order to secure the safety of her children, but my favorite and most twisted is when he gathers all of the survivors in a church, hands out a bunch of pliers, and demands they pull out their own teeth in exchange for his mercy. Number 4. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe again. In Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, Deadpool became aware of his status as a fictional character and lost his mind, going on a brutal kill streak that resulted in all the Marvel heroes and villains getting dispatched in cruel and unusual ways. A few years later, in the sequel, we got to see a Deadpool from another world do the same thing. On this Earth, Deadpool is put under mind control by the villains of the Marvel Universe and tricked into going after his friends. What makes it even more disturbing than the first for me was the fact that while he's attacking the heroes, he is living a fantasy in his head that makes him think that he is going on lighthearted adventures with his friends. This is especially true of his encounter with Spider-Man while bonded with the Venom symbiote. In his mind, Deadpool and Spidey are entered into a pie-eating contest against the Blob in order to win money for charity. In reality, he's actually feasting on Spider-Man's brains. It's more brutal due to the lack of agency he's given in his story and the devastating consequences that it holds. Number 3. The Ultimatum Wave. The Marvel Ultimate Universe was a wild ride. It gave us Miles Morales, as well as the romance between Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, so it makes sense that they would also give us some of the most bizarre and extreme Marvel stories. In Ultimatum, Magneto has been driven mad at the loss of his children and decides that rather than destroying humanity to make the world safe for mutants, he's just gonna kill everyone. He uses a doomsday device and his powers to shift the world off of its axis surface, causing natural disasters all over the globe. Much of Europe, including all of Latveria, is frozen under a layer of ice, and New York is hit by a massive tidal wave. Millions of people all over the world die in the attack, including Nightcrawler and Hank McCoy. Magneto then sends out more of his minions to destroy the heroes, causing the brutal deaths of several more heroes, including Hank Pym, Doctor Strange, and Thor, just to name a few. Professor X gets personally murdered by Magneto, who later has his face blasted off by Cyclops, who then gets assassinated at an anti-mutant rally. It is a relentless story, but I think the most brutal moment is when Pym finds his wife Janet being eaten by the Blob and responds by entering his giant form, picking up the Blob, and biting his head off. Number 2. Marvel Zombies. Marvel Zombies is pretty self-explanatory. It takes place on an alternate Earth where the heroes of the Marvel Universe have been infected with a zombie virus. They retain much of their intelligence and personality, but they are so consumed with hunger that they are willing to go to any lengths to get to their next meal. There is something so brutal about watching all of your favorite heroes hunt down Magneto and brutally and graphically eat him in the opening pages, and it only gets more disturbing from there. I'd say that the most brutal moment in this story is the revelation that Hank Pym has been keeping T'Challa sedated but alive in a lab, and he has been removing his limbs one by one to eat. It's a brutal and disgusting story that you can't help but have fun reading. Number 1. Spider-Man's take on September 11th. There are way more gory and graphic Marvel moments on this list, but the fact that this comic features the real-life tragedy of September 11th, 2001 makes it hard to justify putting it lower on the list. Like, I can't sit here and say that a fictional tidal wave was worse than this. Anyways, this issue of Amazing Spider-Man was released a month after the tragedy and opens with Spider-Man surveying the devastation as civilians ask him why he didn't stop the attack. The book is kind of a mixed bag with the benefit of hindsight, with devastating moments like a little boy lost in the rubble looking for his dad, but also features moments like Doctor Doom crying at the sight of the devastation, as if he hasn't tried to do this exact same thing multiple times. I have mixed feelings about whether this book should have been made so soon after the real-life events, but wherever you land, it's hard not to describe the events depicted as pretty brutal.
Number 10. Defeated by the Green Goblin. Probably one of the most brutal defeats I can think of that Spider-Man has suffered was his final, or at least final at the time, fight against the Green Goblin. In this fight, which happens in the Ultimate Comics in the Earth of 1610, Peter starts off already being run down after facing the Sinister Six. To finish it off, he also must face Green Goblin, who in this reality is a hulking beast, not just a deranged and evil man on a glider in a mask. Just when it seems like Peter is about to be defeated, even being unmasked at this point throughout the course of the fight, Mary Jane shows up to help, running into Green Goblin with a giant truck. Thanks, Mary Jane. However, this wouldn't be enough, and while Green Goblin would also seemingly perish in the end, so would Peter. Of course, both Green Goblin and Peter Parker would later return, but for Spider-Man, this return wouldn't happen for some time, and even when he did at first reveal himself to actually be alive, he chose to pass his mantle on to the new Spider-Man of the Ultimate Comics and Earth 1610, Miles Morales. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to let us know that you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9. The Dimension of Spots. Oddly enough, one of the people who has been shown as powerful enough to defeat Spider-Man was actually the Spot, who most probably think of as more of like a goofy villain, and yeah, most times he kinda is. But during their first fight, he actually proved himself to be pretty powerful, even finding a way to get around Spider-Man's spider sense. This all went down in issue number 99 of the Spectacular Spider-Man, which was also when they had their first fight against one another. Spider-Man ended up being completely surrounded by Spots, and from the Spot dimension, the Spot punched and kicked the hero to the point that Peter found it hard to focus on his spider sense and detect where the danger was coming from to dodge it in time, as it was kind of coming, well, from all around him. The Spot also discombobulated Spider-Man by taking him into the Spot dimension and throwing him through another portal, another Spot, which led out to a brick wall. He left Spider-Man and Black Cat with a warning to not bother the Kingpin again or risk being destroyed by the Spot. Number 8. Spider-Man Reign. While he ultimately comes out victorious in the end, Spider-Man is temporarily defeated during Spider-Man Reign. If you aren't familiar with this story, allow me to explain. Spider-Man Reign has been described before as Marvel's version of The Dark Knight Returns for Spider-Man. In this story, Spider-Man is an elderly man who was once a florist but was recently fired. No longer a hero after years ago losing his wife, Mary Jane, and with her his motivation to be Spider-Man, the city of New York has become a police state, controlled under Mayor Waters' iron fist. Eventually, Spider-Man is inspired once more to rise up, but at first when he does, the mayor responds by sicking his Sinner 6 on Spider-Man. In this fight, he is joined by his old enemy, the Hypno Hustler. However, the Hypno Hustler is soon after defeated, leaving Spider-Man to be unmasked by Kraven, exposing New York City's hero as now an old man. At this moment, he is seemingly brutally defeated. Fortunately though, it's only a brief defeat for this older Spider-Man. Number 7. Loses his marriage. Possibly one of the worst defeats is also not even a physical one. At one point, Mephisto ends up tricking Peter into giving his marriage away. Well, not really tricking him, and not really Peter alone, as Mary Jane was also one of the two to make this call, but it was still pretty brutal. Not just for Peter, but also for all of us readers. After Peter's secret identity was revealed, a hit was put out on him, but when they missed, they actually hit Aunt May instead, who ended up in critical care and was on the verge of dying. In a bid to save her life, Mary Jane and Peter traded away their marriage to Mephisto, having no choice but to do so if they wanted to keep Aunt May alive. And of course, we can't let Aunt May die. I mean, she's lived for so long. Keep her alive. Number 6. Losing his hand and his wife. This defeat comes to us from the very brutal pages of J.J. Abrams and his son Henry Abrams' Spider-Man comic from 2019. In issue number 1, we immediately start off with Spider-Man fighting against a big villain and his army of semi-organic robot specimens. We later learn that this villain's name is Cadaverous. Almost instantly, Peter's life is changed forever when we see him emerge from the rubble with a badly damaged arm, with a hand that looks like it's barely still attached, to be honest, black and blue from the fight. Mary Jane rushes over to him, encouraging Peter to run, but before either of them do, the battle finds them again and Mary Jane is insta-killed when she is impaled by one of Cadaverous's impossibly long claws, or fingers. Claw fingers. Welcome to 2019's Spider-Man. Number 5. Losing his daughter. One of the most heart-wrenching moments in Spider-Man comics for me comes from a very personal moment for both Peter and Mary Jane. This is like a brutal defeat that isn't even like a fight, like a fist fight. At one point, Mary Jane was pregnant and even seemingly gave birth to a baby girl. However, Mary Jane was wrongfully told that the little one did not make it, when in reality Pete and MJ's daughter was actually taken by Allison Mongrain, who was later revealed to be working for Norman Osborn. What Norman wanted with the child, well, we'll never really know, as this was never really revealed to us fans. The only thing that was seemingly confirmed was their daughter's tragic fate, much later on. That is, if we can even believe what Norman says to be true. I personally wouldn't at this point, so I'm still personally hopeful that Peter and Mary Jane's lost daughter could still return one day. Although I don't know how that would work if their marriage no longer existed. Would that affect them having a kid together? Could they have never had a kid together? Does that get erased? Number 4. Got your eye. Morlun actually is the one to feast on Peter's eye. This happens during the story Spider-Man the Other. In this story, Peter finds out he's dying and sets out to try and find a cure. However, not even the greatest scientific minds in the world, including Black Panther and Mr. Fantastic, can find one. He even tries to travel back in time, but that ends up not working out very well either. Morlun at this time was popping up just to say some cryptic stuff to Peter, like, be careful what you wish for, particularly when you don't truly want it. But eventually, the cat is out of the bag, and so Morlun reveals himself and decides to stop speaking cryptically and start kicking butt, which is just what he does. He not only beats up Spider-Man until he can no longer move and lays helpless in the middle of the street, basically a bloody pulp, but he also eats his eyeball. Yes, actually. Don't worry though, Peter would grow it back. This is comics after all. Number 3. Meeting his end. Spider-Man actually died in the comics at one point, and not even when he was inside his own body. This happened when he and Otto Octavius, also known as the villain Dr. Octopus, changed bodies. Body swap! Peter did so unwillingly and ended up being tricked by Doc Ock into doing so. Otto hoped to prolong his life and thwart death by taking Peter's younger body for himself, while his older body, failing, would eventually shut down. Surprisingly, Otto's plan actually succeeded. However, before Peter and Otto's body died, he managed to at least convince Otto to carry on as the hero Spider-Man in his stead. So although he lost kinda overall here, he won that small victory at least, so it's something. Number 2, infected. Something you can't really beat, at least not when it comes to the Marvel Zombies universe, is being infected. In Marvel Zombies, Spider-Man is one of the earliest heroes to be taken over by the zombie virus. This ends tragically for him as the hunger takes hold of him. He actually hurts those who he fought so hard and so long over the years to protect, Mary Jane and Aunt May, devouring them whole. He does his best to resist, but unfortunately he is completely unable to, and even ends up being one of the zombies who actually lives the longest in this series. So he has to sit with this knowledge for quite some time, which I imagine would really suck. Number 1, death of Gwen Stacy. I think one of the worst defeats that Spider-Man has ever suffered, one of his worst losses, especially in his own mind, is the death of Gwen Stacy. Losing her was one of his biggest failings. This one went down during a fight with the Green Goblin, widely considered to be Spider-Man's main nemesis. As they fought, the Green Goblin used Gwen Stacy kind of as bait. At one point, he tosses her from the top of either the George Washington Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge, depending on which version of the story we're talking about here. The original one, it was the George Washington Bridge, I believe. While Spider-Man attempts to stop her fall by catching her with his webbing, it's believed that it was actually the whiplash as a result of Spider-Man's move that resulted in her death, causing her neck to snap. We get that terrible snap sound effect. However, Green Goblin has stated before that it was actually the fall that killed Gwen, and that she was actually dead from the shock even before Spider-Man's webbing had touched her. Either way, Spider-Man still blames himself for her loss even to this day. And to be fair, I mean, editors have confirmed that, yeah, Spider-Man kinda did that. But either way, she would have died, so it's not really his fault, because she's gonna hit the ground, she's gonna die, or you're gonna catch her, she's gonna die. So, death all around.
Number 10, Stephanie Brown. So after months of training from Batman, Stephanie Brown served as Robin during patrols. Nice, not a bad gig at all. Things were going well with the duo, you know, fighting crime, taking ass, kicking names, until she was captured by Mr. Zsasz and she resorted to using lethal force against him. That's a big no in Batman's eyes, so he fired her. Not even a write-up? Come on, dude. Even though she was saving his life, I mean, no? Alright. So her next step was to steal some plans and attempt to regain Batman's trust by going after Gotham's criminal underworld. Sneaky sneaky. This didn't go as planned and a city-wide war erupted. Oof! Yikes. It wasn't long before Stephanie was captured by Black Mask. She was then tortured in order to spill the beans on Batman. So after a harrowing escape, she makes her way to Leslie Tompkins' clinic, in rough shape of course, and her injuries were too much to recover from, and Stephanie Brown died with the Caped Crusader by her side. How lovely and also how tragic. Number 9, Black Mask. Yeah, I figured this would be a suitable place for this one. Making his first appearance in 1985 back in Batman issue 386, Black Mask, also known as Roman Sionis, met his demise in Catwoman Volume 3, issue 52. See, this is why you don't threaten the people that are close to Catwoman, because after breaking out of jail yet again, Deathstroke offers Black Mask a spot in the society, to which he accepts. I'd probably accept too, that sounds like a pretty cool society. Any society's cool in that book. All the while Red Hood is dismantling Black Mask's control over the crime going on in the city. Black Mask, being Black Mask, decides to keep running his mouth and threatens the people closest to Catwoman. So what does she do? Shoots him in the jaw, killing him in the process. Wrong move, bucko. I really enjoyed how they killed him off in Birds of Prey. I was kind of hoping it'd be similar to this, but being blown up, I'm fine with that. That works like a charm as well. Number 8, Guy Gardner. Taking place in a prequel to the Injustice Gods Among Us storyline, we find Superman as the leader of Earth. Makes sense? Look at him, I mean, all those powers. Of course. Using his powers to brutally enforce peace, Green Lantern, aka Guy Gardner, wasn't really a fan of his whole concept. Good Guy Gardner. He was also onto something after all, because Guy eventually discovered that Superman had been an ally to the Sinestro Corps. Traitor. So he goes and gathers his own army, the Green Lantern Corps. Hal Jordan actually took Superman's side here, but that's only because he originally thought that Guy had killed John Stewart, which in fact Sinestro actually did. Got a little, quite the triangle we got here, boys. Hal ended up tearing off Guy Gardner's arm, Bucky Barnes style, before leaving him for death. Not a good way to go. Number 7, Blue Beetle. During the events of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, Ted was tracking a signal from a bug. He followed it to Checkmate headquarters in Switzerland. Upon arriving, he finds files containing all the information of all Earth's superheroes. I'm talking their strengths, weaknesses, identities even. A lot of bad stuff. And then in comes Black King and, drumroll please, Maxwell Lord. The longtime ally had been planning to use Brother Eye and the Omax to kill all of Earth's metahumans. So once the files were deleted, Ted makes a run for it. Stopped by an OMAC and locked up, Maxwell comes in to deliver the final bullet to his head, right after he tells Maxwell to rot in hell, that is. Number 6, Darkseid. Yeah, you heard me. In the final Crisis event, Batman himself killed Darkseid. Now, of course, Batman had to break his only rule to do this, but I mean, come on guys, it's Darkseid we're talking about. We can make an exception. By the time issue 6 rolls around, the world is on the brink of destruction. So Batman decides he's going to use the exact same bullet Darkseid used to kill Orion. So Batman aims and fires it right at his shoulder. Darkseid panics and tries to switch bodies into Detective Dan Turpin, but Wonder Woman comes in, uses a lasso of truth, and releases Darkseid's consciousness from Turpin's body. And at the same time, Batman died. What an event, that's right, so at the same time that Batman shot Darkseid with that bullet, Darkseid used the Omega Beams and just straight up obliterates Batman. Batman ended up teleporting to prehistoric times, but we can't not include that in this list part of this moment. Number 5, Captain Atom. Taking place in the Kingdom Come miniseries, the world is in a future with our favorite superheroes much older. Basically out of touch with the times. So the new generation of superheroes are running free doing all the dirty work. Most of these offspring are children of past superheroes. Some of the new heroes, however, end up kind of being dicks. Yeah, they're becoming a threat, being irresponsible, and they're pretty dangerous. So Batman, being Batman, wanted to ensure a safe future and prevent a war between all of the supers. Not a bad idea, but a little too late. Captain Atom then lost a fight to Parasite. The end result, Captain Atom being ripped apart, causing a nuclear explosion that decimated the entire state of Kansas. Sorry, Kansas. Oops, my bad. Number 4, Martian Manhunter. Your kind will fail. Your kind will always fail. Those are some of the last words spoken by Martian Manhunter in Final Crisis 1, after he gets trapped in a prison. He had originally went there to be undercover as John Jones, and regularly reported back to Batman. Then the villains broke free and he was left behind. Ooh, not good. Human Flame had given the villain Libra instructions to kill Martian Manhunter. Don't do it! So Libra went and stabbed Martian Manhunter with a staff in front of the entire secret society of supervillains, or SS or SOV. Okay, some acronyms don't work, okay? So upon his death, he returned back to his Martian form, and in his final moments, he still managed to send a message back to the Justice League. What a trooper! They held his funeral on his home planet Mars, with Superman giving the eulogy. Can you do mine as well, Superman? My eulogy, please? In time, not now, just like when it happens. Thanks. His final moments were expanded on in the Final Crisis Requiem storyline, teaching us more about his homeworld and the inhabitants of it. Number 3, Wally West. Heroes in Crisis 9. So after visiting the sanctuary, trying to avoid another flashback scenario, past Wally West leans in to break future Wally West's neck. In order to close the timeline, one of the Wallys has to die, right? So then Blue Beetle, Batgirl, Harley, and Booster, they all land and they're super confused seeing what's unfolding. Then they see Poison Ivy, who was presumed dead at the time. So future Wally knows how he feels, so he helps him up and reassures him that he's not alone, and as he himself was there just 5 days prior. Don't kill, don't run, just talk and listen. Pretty solid advice. He goes on to explain that if people could see that even the strongest of heroes are hurting inside, that they need to talk to people, which is a pretty solid line. I feel like a lot of people reading this could use that advice in their own lives in some way. Booster suggests not killing Wally, but instead completing the loop. So by bringing back a Speed clone from the 25th century, that way the old Flash can live on, and the young Flash does the loop over. Kinda like how Cap took the stones back in time to complete that loop. See, while Cap's still alive, he's kinda not because he's stuck in that loop, right? So he's gone, but he's not. But he's gone, but he's not. He's gone. The Heroes in Crisis storyline to take out Wally West went under fire. Like, I mean, what do you guys think? Were you a fan of how the deconstruction of Wally West came about? Let us know down below. Let's talk about it. Number 2, Connor Kent's death. Taking place in the Infinite Crisis storyline, Superboy is killed by Superboy Prime. What? So the other dimension Superboy Prime basically gets jealous and wants to take Superboy's spot in the Paradise dimension. He thinks he's more fitting. Yeah, okay pal, whatever you say. So Superboy Prime attacks him and kicks his ass. Backup arrives, that being the Teen Titans, Doom Patrol, and the Justice Society of America, but the next encounter ends much worse than the previous. Connor and Prime go at it, and eventually Superboy crashes them both into Alexander Luthor's multiverse tower, causing this massive explosion, stopping Alexander from destroying New Earth. Dying in the arms of Wonder Girl, Connor is told by Cassie that he saved the Earth. And in a glorious last line, he says, "I know, Cass, isn't it cool?" And then he dies just moments before the rest of the gang showed up. Superman mourning his death is actually just heartbreaking. And finally, number 1, Hal Jordan Parallax. Parallax entity is the sentient embodiment of fear, the symbol of fear, rather. So, once Hal Jordan becomes the Green Lantern after Abin Sur in Sector 2814, Sinestro made Parallax choose Hal Jordan to free itself from the central battery. Parallax spent many years influencing Hal over time, causing doubt and fear to flood his mind. Once the destruction of Coast City happened, that plus the central battery that Hal destroyed, the entity Parallax was able to latch itself onto Hal Jordan's soul. Not good. Hal's strong willpower made this plan take years to be complete, but once Cyborg Superman helped destroy Coast City, he could only hold on to that willpower for so long. Pushing through all of the anger and grief, Hal Jordan ended up sacrificing his own life to reignite the Earth's sun. Atta boy, Hal. This is actually a really sad moment, like, holy